and for the wrong purposes. I mean, obviously, a great challenge for us is, and not just for us, but it's for others as well. It's how you handle extraditions and transfers, extraditions of suspected terrorists and transfers of detained enemy combatants to countries that may or may not have human rights issues, and we take those considerations very seriously. We have a strong commitment to adhering to our human rights obligations, as well as to protecting our country and our citizens from harm. So we take those obligations, human rights obligations, very seriously. And there have been many occasions where we have not extradited to countries where there's a risk of torture, and we have a very in-depth process for determining whether more likely than not an individual will be subjected to torture if he or she were sent back there. And I think some 30 Guantanamo detainees have been actually sent to countries other than their country of origin, in part for this reason.
Eric, can I just interrupt you here for 1 second? Because I want to ask you and Dr. Hanning a very concrete question, a very concrete dilemma. Let's say a foreign country, let's say Bangladesh, Pakistan, is holding a suspect that is of interest to you, that you want to get information from. You know, of course, that in these countries, torture is very frequently used. Mistreatment is quite ubiquitous. At what point do you draw the line in cooperating with that service? At what point does cooperating with that service actually indirectly or directly encourage that practice in that country? Do you submit questions to them? Do you send over an officer who interrogates them? What is the red line where you would say, at this point, counterterrorism cooperation goes too far because we're becoming implicit in the practices of these countries? Dr. Han.
I think it's not possible to draw a red line, a principal red line. I think first priority, of course, is the security of our people. If there are serious hints that a terrorist attack could be avoided by interrogating this suspect, then, of course, we have to discuss this issue with the service. We wouldn't participate on torture procedures, not at all. If we would have the impression that the information was gained under torture, we wouldn't accept it. I think we have a very clear practice in Germany, in our country. On the other side, you can't really say that every hint, every information is getting from this service is gained under torture. Not at all. I think it's not the normal procedure, even in these countries you have mentioned. Therefore, the normal case is that you can change information, but we have avoided to get inside prisons and to be endangered to participate in torture procedures as well. But it's a difficult situation, a difficult decision-making, and we have done it case by case. It's dependent from the threat on the one side, on the other side, of course, of the practice in the country.
Before Eric gets back, Richard wanted to...
Yeah, I would like to say that the observance of human rights is one of the 4 main pillars of the global strategy for countering terrorism. And this is not only because if you don't observe human rights, you tend to create more terrorism. They're not mutually exclusive, these things. You know, you can't abrogate your principles to counter terrorism and expect to be effective. The observance of human rights is an essential element of effective counterterrorism. And furthermore, it's because we must never forget what we're fighting for. You know, why do we object to terrorism? We object to terrorism, one of the main reasons we object to terrorism, because terrorism itself is abnegation of human rights.
But do you accept that there may be a dilemma in certain situations?
No, I don't. We cannot accept the sort of ticking bomb thing. You know, I need to torture you because there's a bomb going off and going to kill 5 people over here. We can't accept that. I think human rights are an absolute. And unless we stand up for our principles and fight for our principles, and you heard David Trimble earlier, I mean, one of the big issues, I think, for the British government at that time was precisely this. You know, to what extent do you if you like, disregard your principles on human rights because the issue is so important. And I think the lesson that the British government learned was if you do that, you don't solve a problem, you just make it bigger.
Mm-hmm. Eric.
Well, first, to quote Elena Kagan, I don't deal in hypotheticals. So I'm not going to sort of deal with a hypothetical situation because it's so fact specific. I will just underscore that we have very robust means of ensuring that if we do, or seeking to ensure that if we do send someone back to their country of origin, that they won't be tortured. And it's a mixture of our embassy investigating, Department of State and other U.S. agencies on the ground doing that. But I think the broader point here is that, and it highlights the sort of the critical element of criminal justice capacity building, is that giving these countries that we're talking about the means to handle terrorism prosecutions effectively in compliance with human rights standards is critical, because it's in some cases the lack of trust that security services or the military that are sweeping up terrorists in that country, they hand them over to the courts, and they don't get convicted. High acquittal rates, and so the alternative often is to not hand them over to the legal system and to deal with them via other means. And that, I think, is almost a bigger problem than the occasional issue of the detainees that we have or the extraditions that we need to carry forward to those home countries. It's really the indigenous criminal justice systems and the strengthening of human rights capacities there that I think they don't get enough, that doesn't get enough attention. It's not as sexy, but it's actually much more critical, I think, in the long term.
Before I open this discussion to the audience, one more question that I would like to raise is precisely about multilateral engagement. Bill Patterson, you talked about your cooperation with Indonesia. That seems to be mostly bilateral stuff that you're doing. Do you think multilateral organizations can be useful, and if so, how?
Yes, I think they can. We obviously participate in the G8 Counterterrorism Action Group. That's done some useful work, particularly encouraging countries to sign on to the UN conventions on terrorism. We also have taken initiative to set up regional workshops in various areas, particularly in Southeast Asia, but now also extending into South Asia and parts of the Middle East, to deal with building capability in areas like the management and accounting for radioactive sources, for sensitive chemicals, for biological materials. These are parts of the world where often this is at a fairly low level, and we're trying to sensitize people there to improve management. We work also with the UN, and recently we and others have been working with the UN on police and prosecutors workshops in South Asia. Aside from imparting knowledge, one of the great benefits of this has been to bring together officers from across South Asia, judges and police, to talk where they haven't been talking. Obviously, India and Pakistan, for instance, don't regularly get together and discuss these matters, but we provide a venue through working with the UN Counterterrorism Executive Directorate or others to give cross-regional, cross-country contact where it hasn't existed. One of the things we found in Southeast Asia after Bali was that there was movement of terrorists between Malaysia, the southern Philippines, Indonesia, but their law enforcement authorities didn't know each other well and didn't cooperate well. So bringing them together, getting them to know it, developing relationships has been an important part of this.